Are we really like sheep? Do we need a shepherd? And what are the implications of the answers to those questions for God's people? In our lesson today, I want to discuss this very topic. We hear about sheep, and there's a term going around I like, sheeple. Do we need leaders? Do we need overseers? Let's look into that today. I want to start by looking at Numbers 27, where Joshua is succeeding Moses as Moses prepares to look at the promised land at the top of a mountain and then die. And here's what Moses says. Let's get the context. Yahweh said to Moses, "Go up into this mountain of Abiram and see the land that I have given to the people of Israel. When you have seen it, you also shall be gathered to your people, as your brother Aaron was, because you rebelled against my word in the wilderness of Zin, when the congregation quarreled, failing to uphold me as holy at the waters before their eyes. These are the waters of Meribah of Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. Moses spoke to Yahweh, saying, Let Yahweh, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation." Why would Moses make such a request? Here he is about to die, about to be led to the end of his life, and he asks of Yahweh, "Bring someone else in my stead." Do they really need someone? Surely in this theocracy they have Yahweh. These are men who are strong and able, many spiritual leaders. Do they need another Moses, or one likened unto him, or a leader or shepherd, or however you want to see it? Before we answer that question, I saw a social experiment that I thought would be worthwhile showing here. It's about 3 minutes long. Let's look at this as we understand human tendency and this concept of sheeple.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking, to answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do?
So, what do you think she'll do? There's no one there. So everyone that had the influence on her is no longer present. But the beeps will continue. What's going to happen?
She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes.
Great,
thanks so much.
Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense.
Here's a rebel. He refuses to stand up with everyone else. What do you think is going to happen now as they continue this experiment with this new addition?
Eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think.
That last line has to be unsettling. Similar forces are forming the way we think. Similar forces. What are the implications of this experiment? You know, as we think about this idea of sheep and people, sheeple, how does this continue to promote that idea? Who would you be in this room? We would like to think that we would be the rebel and that we would put our feet down and stand up for our convictions and ask the questions, and maybe we would. But statistically and realistically, what happens most of the time is we conform. We assimilate. This is a very powerful revelation. This is something that shouldn't be new to any of us. Do you think that this happens anywhere in our society? Have you seen it happen in your workplace, classroom, home, community, church? It's certainly happening. Wherever there are people, many experiments like this have been done to show we conform, we assimilate, we flock like sheep. But it's unsettling if you think about it. Because what if someone, something, some entity were intentional in how it or he or she wanted to control the people? And a model was developed that allowed people to fall into a trap that got them off course. Why do I show this? Because in the context of Moses leaving, he says, we can't leave these people. Can we put someone else here? Why? Why would Moses say that? Well, if we look further, if we continue reading, he says, who shall go out before them and come in before them? Who shall lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of Yahweh may not be as sheep that have no shepherd? One of the most unsettling images that were woven throughout the scriptures, Old, New Testament, Proverbs, New Testament, is this idea of sheep without a shepherd. We continue to get this refrain as God's people are left without a shepherd. Or not even just God's people, people in general. But sheep without a shepherd, nonetheless. What happens to sheep without a shepherd? Well, if we look at this experiment, we see exactly what could happen. Everyone follows everyone else. Everyone does what makes them comfortable, as the lady said. I just felt more comfortable doing what everyone else did. If we back up and from that video and think about what happened from a objective standpoint, if you will, from a 10,000 foot standpoint. What happened? Here's what happened. So there's a group who decided we want to teach this behavior. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to saturate this environment with people who do the behavior. And then once it's been done long enough, once we've crossed a threshold of enough people doing it, you no longer have to teach the person to do it or to continue to do it. You see, if one or two people stood up, that'd be weird. But if everybody's doing it, you're the weird one. And you need to conform. I know when we look at it from this point, it rises something up in us that says, I'm not going to go for it. But the truth of it is, we do. The real question is not, has this happened or is this happening, but how is this happening in our lives right now, in your life right now? What type of traditions, what type of habits and patterns have we embraced unknowingly? She had no clue why they were standing, but it didn't matter. The model goes like this as we continue. Teach this behavior by making it popular, and you no longer have to teach her again. She had become a very reliable model to teach everyone else. Doesn't matter that we don't know. This is just what we do. And how effective. Here's someone who may not have all the charisma, all the leadership qualities of a spokesperson and all those things. And yet she influenced the whole community of everyone who came in by her behavior, one person at a time. Plant the seed so well that you no longer have to do anything else because we've imprinted that on you. This is powerful. And this leads to an understanding of why it is that Moses says, we cannot leave these sheep without a shepherd. If you look at the idiom that we shall go out before them, it's important that to Moses here, and he uses a military term. It refers to military leadership. Not like others do who send out their troops first and they come last. So the officers of modern Israel's defense forces are noted for the battle cry, a hooray, follow me. Basically it's saying, we need someone to go before the people. Well, I can take myself. I'll go myself. I'm fine. What do I need someone to go before me and after me and such? No, we need someone to go before you, to lead you, to follow up behind you. Also, this verb is used to point to a military officer who not only leads his troops, but plans its strategy. That is, who initiates military policy. What do you do with troops without a commanding officer? It seems that we as a people are smart enough to decide our own lives and do what we need to do. But this just isn't the case. We weren't created that way. And as we see from this and so many other experiments, though we have many shepherds, we all are like sheep. In 2 Samuel, you see the same term used when spoken of it for David. When Saul was king over us, it was you who led out and brought in Israel. And Yahweh said to you, you shall be shepherd of my people Israel, and you shall be prince over Israel. Yahweh desires shepherds for his people. This can be challenging if we're a people who don't want a shepherd. I know enough Bible. I know enough about God. I'll just be to myself. There's a strong community, and I've been among those who've had similar sentiments that says, is this really necessary? I follow God. I do what I need to. And to a degree, it's true. Yeshua is my shepherd. However, Yahweh, the shepherd of shepherds, have given us shepherds, leaders, and such to follow. How does Yahweh see his people? As we have already mentioned and have established, as sheep. In 1 Kings 22, it says, and Micaiah said, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains, as sheep that have no shepherd. And Yahweh said, These have no master. Let each return to his home in peace. What a sad sight. They have no master. That's sad. It seems like, no, that'd be free. I don't want a master. I don't want a shepherd telling me where to go, what to do, how to do things, what to think. I want the independence and freedom. And we can have all those things, but within a proper framework. Which leads us to the question, can sheep live without a shepherd? So I did a little study because I don't have sheep of my own. And here's what I found. There is a difference between wild sheep and domesticated sheep. Wild sheep can live without a shepherd. For their coats, they can brush up against the bark of trees and they can get along just fine. The thing is, domesticated sheep are the ones often referred to in Scripture. These sheep have been bred to produce the hair that we see on this sheep here. This poor guy has been without his shepherd for over 5 years. He's not doing well. Matter of fact, it's likely that if he fell over, that'll be the end for him. I could see no way that he would get up. Matter of fact, I saw him or her being sheared and he couldn't move. He was on his back. It's just too much. Domesticated sheep require pasture. And if we are the sheep to our shepherd, we need to be in his pasture. We require the pasture. We are not able to find all this on our own. That's domesticated sheep. They require water. As you can see from this picture, they require grooming and they require protection. It shouldn't be hard to understand why sheep require protection. They have no fangs. They have no claws. What really do they have? They don't even look scary. They just look like a big puff ball from the sky. What could they do? They need protection. Sometimes we are deceived in thinking that we are not like sheep. And we don't require pasture, water, grooming, protection, or we can provide all these things on our own. What are sheep like? They wander off and get lost. Just as I explained before, sometimes we think, oh, I can just do this. Now, while sheep are very social, sometimes they get distracted. Or they find something else interesting and they wander off. And that's the tendency. Matter of fact, from studying this, I learned that sheep are wired to blindly follow each other so they feel safe. This is how they're wired. You can't do anything about it. Depending on the breed, this tendency is stronger than others, but it's still there. There is safety in numbers. Doesn't that sound like people? Doesn't that sound like us? We see this refrain come up when we hear comments like, everybody's doing it. Look how many subscriptions and likes it has. Surely this is good because look how many reviews. Look how many people's wearing that, saying that, listening to this, doing this. It's got to be okay. Matter of fact, the more ubiquitous a act is, the more accepted and comfortable we feel with adopting it for ourselves. Sheep, we're wired that way. Matter of fact, if you look even deeper to a cellular level, there's something called the mirror gene, in which we learn to mirror each other and to do what the other's doing. There's one quote from someone who took care of sheep on his website. It says, even when being watched by a shepherd, it's easy for sheep to get lost. All it takes is for one member of the flock to wander off, and the rest will follow. This sheep who's wandering off is just following whatever, better grass on the other side, interested in some shiny light or a bug, who knows? But all the sheep, man, move on over with them. Sheep are easily spooked. It doesn't take much to spook a sheep or most animals. clanging pots and pans and loud noises easily scare sheep. Sheep follow the shepherd who feeds them. Sheep give people and other things that they are weary of a lot of distance between them and the perpetrator or the potential perpetrator and themselves. But once they get used to being fed by that person, they get more comfortable. And a lot of shepherds corral their sheep this way by shaking some of the feed into a bucket, and they hearing that sound or making some kind of click noise to feed them. They don't mind eating. Just make sure you feed them and they'll be consistent with that. How are we, Yahweh's people, like sheep when we look here? Well, it's easy to imagine. We wander off and we get lost. Matter of fact, in Isaiah 53, I believe it says, we all like sheep have fallen astray. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Why does it say it this way? Because everyone knows that sheep get lost. Matter of fact, when you really study this out, you learn that it's a huge headache for shepherds trying to go off and find that sheep. Because when they get lost, they really get lost. They just keep walking and turning corners, and they're really out there. So we tend to do the same. We wonder. And it doesn't happen intentionally, but it happens in degrees and slowly. We are easily spooked. We get afraid. We get concerned. Now, it doesn't look like a sheep, but we get anxious and worried. And fear drives too many of our decisions. And we are happy to continue to follow the one or the thing that feeds us. There are some implications here as well. If I think from an enemy standpoint, what could this mean? This means that I know exactly how to derail a people, be it God's people or otherwise. But let's talk about God's people. If I'm an enemy, knowing that people are operating like sheep, there's 3 ways here that are very clear. A great blueprint for how to derail the sheep. First one, they wander and get lost. It's easy for them to do this because they get distracted about other things they want. Or a tendency we mentioned earlier, they tend to want to do what's popular. If I can make something popular or seem like it is, or maybe it really is, then it takes little effort to get someone to do it. How about making it cool? How about putting it on media and movies and music? How about making sure everyone else around does it, dresses like it, talks like it? Been doing this since I was a kid, for generations. Matter of fact, I believe in Mark 17, Yeshua runs into some people who have a hard time with his practices because they say, we've been doing this for generations. And not just us, people who we respect highly. Now, we may not say this all the time, but we think it. We rarely value things that have been done for a long time, especially if it's from people who we have a lot of respect for. So, first tactic, make it popular. Tactic number 1, they're easily spooked. What does that mean? Promote fear. If I can get some people afraid of something, and I can use that fear to corral them. How are sheep corralled commonly? Dogs, sheep dogs, collies and all of sorts. Why? Because they view the dog as a threat. And with that fear, one dog can corral dozens of sheep. Why? Fear is that powerful. And lastly, sheep will follow the one who feeds them. If the sheep want to eat, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a good shepherd or otherwise. You give me food. If, from an enemy perspective, I wanted to get someone to be derailed and off path, how about we meet their needs? How about we give them what their flesh desires? Make them feel more secure by giving them more stuff. Make them feel more secure by giving them more money. Make them feel more beautiful by giving them more compliments, hugs, and kisses and relationships. Giving them more power through promotions and opportunities. Whatever it is, it continues to feed. So like sheep, we will follow. In too many humbling ways are we connected to and related to sheep. So what's the role of shepherds? To be a shepherd, right? Well, we look in verse 16 as we continue to read. It says, "Let Yahweh, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation, who shall go out before them and come in before them, who shall lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of Yahweh may not be as sheep that have no shepherd." So one of the roles we see here, as we mentioned earlier, is to lead, to go before, go after, prepare the way, give direction and purpose. What are we doing? Where are we going? What's the focus? Even to pray for the sheep and the people. John 21:17, we also see a huge role of the shepherds. And Yeshua was speaking to Simon Peter. He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And this is after the resurrection of Yeshua. And he's asking these questions in this popular verse here. Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Yeshua said to him, "Feed my sheep." So from this passage, we learn two things. One, there are sheep, and we are they. Two, the role of a shepherd is to feed those sheep. Now, what does that look like? Well, we could talk about literal feeding, and that's definitely for sure. We saw Yeshua do the same thing. But feeding can and does include so much more than just meeting the physical needs. But both are important. And we see that here from our shepherd, Yeshua, speaking to another shepherd, Peter. Feed my sheep. There's another part here too that we see that they're his sheep. Though Yeshua was telling Peter to feed the sheep, they're not Peter's sheep. They're Yeshua's sheep. And the command is to feed them. What kind of shepherds does Yah seek? So as we continue in Numbers, we see that Moses' appeal to Yahweh to have a leader was successful, in that Yahweh said, okay. And he says, get Joshua. So Joshua said to Moses, take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. So we don't want just anyone, obviously, to be the shepherd, a man in whom is the Spirit. We don't really know exactly what that means, in whom is the Spirit, but the Spirit of God has that same Spirit from Yahweh is an easy way to translate that. Not just a man of carnalities and fleshly living, but someone who has the name of Yahweh on him and in him. Ezekiel 34 gives us a really great picture of how Yahweh feels about the shepherds and the role that they should play, and particularly shouldn't play here. The word of Yahweh came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy, and say to them, even to the shepherds, thus says Yahweh God. Ah, shepherds of Israel, who have been feeding yourselves. Should not shepherds feed the sheep? So we see it again. Shepherds need not feed themselves only, but feed the sheep. And I'm speaking to you as shepherds. Yes, most of us identify as sheep, and we are very happy to follow, but we also are shepherds. Shepherds insofar that we have been given the task of being an example and bringing God's people in to his fold. And it's not enough that we simply feed ourselves every Sunday, Saturday, Wednesday, Monday on his word, and all the times we're meeting and enjoying the fellowship. He says, no, feed my sheep. It's really easy to be a consumer in this mentality, in this society today. The society is set up for consumers. for everyone to feel their needs are being met and they're comfortable? Are you entertained? Are you fed well? But those who take what they're eating and give to others. Paul says in one of his letters, I believe in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, he says, we were comforted so that we may comfort you. So you're not being comforted and fed for your own sake. He says, but these shepherds have been feeding themselves. Should not shepherds feed the sheep? It makes sense on a practical standpoint. Of course, feed the sheep. But we should also see this spiritually. You eat the fat, you clothe yourselves with wool, you slaughter the fat ones, but you do not feed the sheep. Feed the sheep would include, well, let's continue reading. Verse 4, the weak you have not strengthened. There are weak among you. Sometimes we stay away from the weak. You know, I know sometimes it's a struggle for me to be around the weak. And the weak can mean a lot of different things, right? The weak are often those who are not as strong in the areas that we're strong. I think academically, I've been teaching math for 10 years. And I have a master's degree in math. That means when I'm talking with someone about mathematical concepts or teaching someone, I can have a lower patience or a threshold for patience because my understanding is so strong in this area that it's hard for me to understand how you can't understand. Or, as I've recently learned, just through taking cognitives and emotional tests and whatnot, my optimism is very strong. I love to encourage and influence and be positive. It's how Yahweh made me, and it's it's what I pursue. So it's hard for me to understand those who tend to have a more somber and even depressing spirit and struggling with so many things. But he says, the weak you have not strengthened. Instead of just diagnosing the problem of our congregation and society, he says, no, as a shepherd, you should be strengthening the weak. That's your role. If it's an area where you are disgusted or upset or bothered with, oftentimes that's the area of your calling. And in so far that it's saying you should be doing something. That's what a shepherd does. It doesn't just look out the window and say, look, we have so many problems. And I've seen too many believers, well-intentioned, spend most of the time talking about, look at all the problems. He says, no, there's verbs in here. You have not strengthened the weak. The sick, you have not healed. Well, I don't have the power of healing. So we can look at it in a physical or a spiritual way. There are sick people all around. People are sick with physical infirmities that we could bandage their wounds. Sick people in their heads because of how they've drunk from the well of society and it's corrupted them. Sick people in their spirits because of how they've been raised and brought up, because they've taken on the teachings that we've talked about that's caused them to stand at the bell of every buzzard, of every buzz, not realizing they're in prison to their own patterns and bad habits. They're sick. He says, heal them. That's what shepherds do. The injured you have not bound up. Yeah, because they're injured. Look how broken and beat up they are. And again, we mentioned physically, yes, but sometimes the more tough ones are the ones that are beat up from the inside in ways that are not easy to see, in ways that show up in anger, promiscuity, bad habits, withdrawal, so many ways, so many evils. It shows up in ugly and nasty ways. We all have them. We're sheep. The injured you have now bound up, the strayed you have not brought back like sheep. Bring back the strays. Those who have wandered away, bring them back. The lost you have not sought. Those who are just flat out lost, you have not been seeking them. We see them. We talk about them. We make notes of them. We point our finger and remember how we used to be, but we are not seeking. And with force and harshness, you have ruled over them. Do we thumb our noses up at those who are not like us? I'm glad I'm not like those people. He says, you're a shepherd. I used to think that a shepherd, because of how it's spoken of in Scripture, was someone to look up to. How honorable. And then I learned that shepherds, even in Scripture, even during those times, were not looked highly upon. It was not cool to be a shepherd. It was not the thing for a kid to grow up and says, one day I want to be a shepherd. It was a nasty job. You're out with the sheep all day, all night, because a shepherd had to be there for protection and guidance and keeping the sheep from wandering off and on and on and on. Matter of fact, even Egypt, if you remember in the scripture in Genesis, at the end of Genesis, Joseph tells his father, tell him you're shepherds. Because if you tell him you're shepherds, he'll give you the land of Goshen that's outside of the main area of Egypt. Tell them you're shepherds because they don't want nothing to do with those guys. Shepherds role. And as you see here, it's dirty. It's nasty. It's uncomfortable, to say the least. It's inconvenient. It's problematic. It's people. It's sheep. That's what shepherds do. So if you're looking for the answer to a question, how do you know if it's the right shepherd? Yeshua gives us a way in saying, look at their fruit. And he sent back word to John the Baptist when those asked of him. He says, I heal the sick, the lame can walk. And look, he's pointing back to, I'm a shepherd. I'm the one to come. How should sheep be to the shepherd? In Hebrews 13, verse 17, it says, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls, as those who will have to give an account. It's a tough scripture. See, these leaders, they're sheep too. They're sheep to other shepherds, and they're sheep to the ultimate shepherd, Yahweh. But we must not make their job difficult, those who lead and give us direction, but obey them and submit to them. Now, we're not talking about the political leaders of this world. The context here is clearly spiritual. And we know that because it says they're keeping watch over your souls. Who else does that? I'm concerned about your spiritual well-being. I'm concerned about you making it to the next life and being truly saved. I'm concerned that in this life you have it to a full abundance and you don't get caught up in the trap that we saw in the beginning video. See, shepherds do that. Shepherds will walk into that room and say, what are we doing? And stop it. And shepherds are often killed by the sheep because sheep are very comfortable being sheep. As we see in the scriptures, if you study out the life of a shepherd, even Yeshua mentioned this. I think he said from Abel to Zechariah, prophets were killed, not by the nations, but by the people, by the sheep. Shepherds have sheep to fear because sheep like their ways. We've been doing this a long time. If you remember, you're bagging up a little bit into going into the promised land. When Joshua and Caleb came and said, we can do it, versus the other 10 who said we can't, and the rest of the community who was convinced that they were right, they began to pick up stones and say, we're going to stone and kill you. Wow. We didn't have to go into the quote unquote world to find this. It's right there among the sheep. He says, don't make it hard for them. Submit to them. Shepherds are going to say things that no one else sees. Because fish don't talk about water. They just swim in it. Shepherds ask about the water. Shepherds ask about the buzzing, the bell that rings in the standing. Shepherds ask a lot of questions and challenge the mores, or the whatever the word is, the traditions and the things that have become common and that we've all just gotten comfortable seeing and doing. And they challenge us to say, is this truly what we should be doing? And inside of us, we say, we've been doing this for years. Everyone's been doing this. What do you mean? And we'll band together and say, we got to get this guy out of here. He's disrupting things. And that's what Yeshua did. And by their own sheep that he was trying to lead out, he was slaughtered by them. They're overseeing our souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy, not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. It's going to be uncomfortable. A shepherd has to use the hook of that staff, I imagine, to pull those sheep in sometime. But he's trying to protect them. He's trying to correct them so that their souls can be well. I want to close in this final passage because it's nice to end on the Good Shepherd. Yeshua speaks in John 10 saying, I am the Good Shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay my life down for the sheep. And I lay down my life for the sheep. So we see again that the shepherd's role is still the same. Serve the sheep. The shepherd's role is not one that lords over in a high palace and sits comfortably. No, it's a lot of work. Hunting down lost sheep, bandaging up wounds, looking for water in green pastures, constantly thinking about what's best for the sheep, what's best for their future, getting his hens dirty, and his or her hens dirty. Because if I'm reading correctly, historically, shepherds were often women as well, serving, ministering to the sheep. So it doesn't matter, old, young, race, whatever, background, we're shepherds. If you have kids, you're shepherds. If you're of anybody, people follow you. You can be looked at as a shepherd. But of course, we talk about shepherds of God's people in ministry. But there's all kinds of ways we can shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. In verse 16, and I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. You know, I'm always amazed, and I find it kind of humorous now. I didn't always. That we have so many religions and churches and just in the Christendom, right? So we've tried to separate ourselves from certain terminologies and words, whether it be disciples, Christians, followers, church of this, church of that. But I love the way Yeshua speaks. It's always so clear. I got one flock. And sometimes we get confused thinking, which church is he coming for? What about them? What about? He says there's only one church. Doesn't matter where you attend and what house or what building or what part of the world, what culture. There's one church. And there's always been one church. And we call the places we build churches, but they're not. They're buildings. There's one church and there's one shepherd. There's one ultimate shepherd that we should be looking to. And the other shepherds he sent should be pointing to him. And we should be checking for that and testing for that. But what can we learn here from this last passage as sheep? We can learn that, number one, we need to know the shepherd. We need to know him. And we may be thinking, I'm watching this video and I'm going to church and I'm doing things so I know them. But we need to make sure we truly know him. But more importantly, as a point was brought up when I did this lesson earlier, is we need to make sure we are known by him. For it says here, I'm the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. In Mark chapter 7, I think verse 21, it talks about, I don't know you. Depart from me, you evildoers. And these men were saying, we've preached and we've done these things in your name. He says, I don't know you. See, you can't enter the kingdom, he was telling them, not because you don't know me or you don't think you know me. It's because I don't know who you are. Are you known by Yeshua? Not that you know him. Oh, I've heard the stories. I read the Bible. I go to church. And you're comparing yourself to others. See, there is no others. It's just you and Yahweh. He says, I know you. So the number one thing we should meditate on today and this week is, does he know me? And how could he know me? Spending time together would be good. Prayer and Bible study. Doing his word. Doing his commands. Making a difference in his kingdom. You know, Paul, Acts, there were men trying to cast out demons. And they says they tried to do it in the name of the God that Paul was preaching. And the demons told them, it says, Paul, I know, but who are you? We got Paul's name, but who are you? Even the demons knew. But are we known by Yeshua? Are we known by Satan? Satan knows those who are disrupting his plans in his kingdom. But going back to this point, are we known by Yahweh? The other thing is we need to listen to his voice. He says, they will listen to my voice. This is how you know you're a part of his sheep and his shepherd and his fold. He says, they listen to my voice. Now, this listen doesn't mean I heard what you said. This means I do what I heard. I'm actually doing. He who has an ear, let him hear. That's not saying make sure the vibrations of the sound be picked up by the cochlears in your ear, whatever it's called. No, it says if you got an ear to hear, do it. If you're doing those things, then praise Yahweh. You are in that fold and in that flock. He will listen to what he's saying, to the voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. The last point is this. I have other sheep that are not of this fold. As sheep who are listening to the shepherd, we need to be looking for the other sheep that are not of this fold. Not talking about the other sheep, not pointing to them, not just making sermons and teachings about them, but bringing them into this fold, ministering to them, reaching out to them. Because that's what he called us to do, and that's his desire. That's the desire of our shepherd. You know you have a problem as a wandering sheep if you start to guide your life by the wrong questions and start asking questions like, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with that? You're wondering. And I mention that because it says, listen to my voice. Sometimes we have an interesting way of listening. If you've ever been a son or daughter, which we've all have, we have interesting ways of walking around what we don't want to do and do want to do. But he says, do what I says. See, as you hear this message, sometimes things will prick your heart and challenge and convict you and call you to change because the Spirit's prompting you. Do not harden your heart the day you hear his voice. Are you responding to that call? Are you showing up week after week listening to messages that are challenging you? But the message you're hearing is not translating into your feet? Doing something, your hands doing something, your spirit moving? It's more of a mental assent to you that says, yes, I know that's right. Oh, that's really good. But I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing because I've been doing this for a long time and this is what we all do. And a lot of people I know do this too. And that sheep mentality comes in and takes over. He says, listen to my voice. I know you don't hear this everywhere. A lot of things that the shepherd will say are not going to be popular. It's still going to come from the shepherd though. So those are 3 things that we need to remember here. Be known by him. Seek out his sheep and listen to his voice. Guys, I hope this has been a blessing to you as we reflect on sheeple and how we're like sheep and how we need to be responsive as both sheep and shepherds, because we are both. How we need to humble ourselves as sheep and truly listen to his voice. And we need to evaluate our own lives to find, how have I followed patterns that don't make sense? Or not that they don't make sense, because sometimes that's the trouble too, is it makes too much sense and we do it because it feels good, it makes sense. But patterns that we've done simply because they were traditions and that don't necessarily promote God's ways. Don't ask no more. Ask no longer. What's wrong with this? Ask what's right with this. How is this righteous? How does this bring him glory? How does standing up and sitting down, what is this about? Then I'm not going to do it. How do I need to stand up among the believers in my own community to share things that God has put on my heart that we should or should not be doing? May you be blessed, those who hear this message and share with others. Blessings to you. Thank you, guys. Amen.